I don't generally like, I don't know, like reaction videos, right? Most of the people who make reaction videos, they just sit there and they make funny faces, and I don't want to do that. But when I make reaction videos, when I react to Jordan Peterson, when I react to, to John Stossel, I am talking about facts. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about facts. And so we're going to do a reaction video. I've watched some of this. I haven't watched all of it, but Jon Stewart, I used to kind of like Jon Stewart. He was on the Daily Show and during the Bush years, and he gave it to the Bush family quite a bit. He criticized the Bushes for their weapons of mass destruction lies and all of that. On his podcast recently, he had Condoleezza Rice, the Secretary of State from the Bush administration, and Hillary Clinton, the former First Lady, former Secretary of State for Barack Obama. And the level of bullshit that came out of the mouths of Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton on that podcast is utterly shocking. And so we're just going to take it apart bit by bit. We're just going to take it apart because, I don't know, are you the kind of person that screams at your TV? I do this a lot. I watch television, I watch news, and I sit there and it's like I hear things that must be refuted. I hear things that absolutely cannot stand. And so I want to respond to them. And now, thanks to the power of modern technology and YouTube, I can respond to them. And I'm not just sitting in my living room shouting at Fox News anymore. Now I am on YouTube with hundreds of people watching, shouting at Hillary Clinton, Jon Stewart, and Condoleezza Rice. So I just wanted to let's go over the facts here because it's shocking. Again, that in this clip here, this is a 5-minute clip. I love Jimmy Dore, by the way. Jimmy Dore is awesome. He's like the best guy out there, seriously. And we're going to go through this and we're just going to debunk it. And it's amazing. And Jon Stewart knows better than this. He really knows better than this, I think. This is what people do to get careers. This is what people do to get clout. There were people like this in Germany who sat with Hitler. They just sat with Hitler and they're like, yeah, I don't want to have my career ruined. I want to be famous. I want clout. And they go along with this. But this is Jon Stewart sitting with Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice. And it's just utterly amazing what is said here. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Just very briefly on Libya, because that was on my watch.
But this is not, again.
No, but I want to make a larger point because, Gaddafi was a bad actor. Everybody knew he was a bad actor.
Whoa, hold up. Everybody knew. That's not an argument. Gaddafi created the highest life expectancy and standard of living on the African continent. Gaddafi sent money and support to Nelson Mandela. Gaddafi sent money and support to the IRA and the Irish freedom struggle. Gaddafi built the world's largest irrigation system, the Great Man-Made River. Gaddafi provided jobs to any Africans who would come to Libya. I mean, he raised an entire country up from poverty. He eliminated illiteracy. I mean, he built a prosperous socialist society on the African continent. And you're saying he's a bad guy. Everybody knows that. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, well, she said it. I mean, it's just like Gaddafi's record in terms of supporting the Black Panthers, giving millions of dollars to the Black Panther Party in the United States. His record in terms of empowering women in Libya. He brought women into government. Read the Green Book and what it said about women, how it was far more advanced in terms of women's participation in government than most of the countries in that region. I mean, Gaddafi was an amazing person in terms of what he achieved in raising people out of poverty and supporting global struggles against imperialism, building power plants, building hydroelectrical facilities, building the world's biggest irrigation system. She just says he's a bad actor. Oh, okay. And just because, we've all been brainwashed to hate Gaddafi, I guess it must be true. But it's like this is a man who improved the lives of literally millions of people by a lot and didn't just do it in his own country. This is a great hero of history. And she just said, oh, he's a bad actor. Oh, he's a bad actor. Oh, okay. All right.
He threatened to kill his people by cockroaches.
He threatened to kill his people by cockroaches. I'm like envisioning like an old science fiction movie where they have like giant cockroaches attacking the city. Or so, like he threatened to kill his people by cockroaches. You know, I mean, what is that? What is that? I mean, he threatened to kill his people by, I mean, did he like, I mean, this is like the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He threatened to, I mean, does she mean with cockroaches? He threatened to kill his people like cockroach. I mean, yeah, I have a feeling that didn't happen.
States was actually the supporter of European countries through NATO and the Arab League, which for the very first time came and said, we want to be part of trying to protect the people of Libya. Now,
okay, now who is the Arab League? Who is the Arab League, right? Those are the Arab countries. Now, what countries are in the Arab League? Since, you know, we're all so concerned about the people of Libya and evil Gaddafi. One of the countries in the Arab League is called Saudi Arabia. One of the only countries in the world that still executes people by beheading, where a third of the country are guest worker slaves who have no rights, who get tortured and disappeared and horrendously treated. A country that's currently bombing the shit out of Yemen and has killed thousands of people. That's one of the countries in the Arab League, right? There's other countries in the Arab League with similar human rights issues. Jordan, Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates. So, the Arab League said to do it, right? I mean, it's not like, it's like she's criticizing human rights and Gaddafi's treatment of his people. And then she brags in the next sentence about aligning with the Arab League, right? Keep in mind that during the Arab Spring, the people of Bahrain, who live under an autocratic king, rose up and overthrew the king and tried to have democracy. And then Saudi Arabia sent its military into Bahrain to slaughter people on the streets and reinstall the puppet king, right? I mean, it's like, but the Arab League said to do it. I mean, this is utterly ridiculous. So Gaddafi was bad, and it's okay that we invaded and destroyed the country because the Arab League said to do it. The Arab League are human rights violators and head choppers and funders of Al-Qaeda and bombers of Yemen and invaders of Bahrain. What is she talking about? The Arab League said to do it.
So I feel that particular intervention, we had certain capabilities militarily that nobody else had, which we used to assist them. But, you know, the Emirati.
To assist them, you mean to destroy the country? Like, there are parts of Libya that still don't have electricity now. To destroy big chunks of a huge irrigation system that was greening the desert. Military capabilities to slaughter civilians, to destroy schools, to destroy hospitals, to destroy a country with a beautiful medical system that had been built by socialism. I mean, yeah, military capabilities to help them. Yeah, you help them so much. Look how they're doing now. Look how Libya is now.
Were flying and the Jordanians were flying, etc. The problem, and this is where I think you make a really good point. The problem is, okay, Gaddafi's gone.
Mm-hmm.
His horrible prisons are emptied.
I think there's still prisons in Libya. And I think there's actually open-air slave markets now in Libya. Did you know that? Now in Libya, they have open-air slave markets where human beings are sold as chattel. So I'm not seeing the improvement. Look at Libya now, where people are drowning in the Mediterranean, trying to get out of the hell she brought to it. His prisons are gone. I think those prisons are still there. I think there's two factions fighting for power. There's chunks of the country that don't have electricity. There's a huge amount of human trafficking. There's ISIS has set up shop. No, things aren't better.
What comes next?
Right.
What comes next?
And that's always a problem because there's always a vacuum. Because look, dictators don't allow institutions to flourish.
False. Read the Green Book. The basis of the Libyan government, the basis of it was the popular councils. The way the Libyan government had its strength was that in every neighborhood and every block, they had these people's assemblies, people's councils that were the basis of the government. Go and read the Green Book. Read about how Gaddafi was so confident that his people supported him that they were just handing out guns to their people on the street. Alex Jones went there. Cynthia McKinney went there. My former boss, Ramsey Clark, he went there. They saw it with their own eyes. The people of Libya were well organized in supporting Gaddafi. And those rebels didn't have popular support. And the reason they were losing, the reason that they were losing, the reason they were losing is they didn't have popular support. And the NATO bombing campaign happened because of the fact that they didn't have popular support on the ground. They had to come in with the cruise missiles because the population was behind Gaddafi. And they didn't allow institutions to exist. No, they allowed institutions to flourish. Gaddafi built universities all over Libya. Before Gaddafi, they didn't have anywhere near the level of universities that they had under Gaddafi's leadership. He built these people's assemblies and revolutionary committees in every neighborhood. That's how he stayed in power, for Christ's sakes. I mean, they don't allow institutions to exist. No, they have to have institutions. It's the capitalist rulers that don't need institutions. They get the support of big corporations and banks. But in order for Gaddafi, a revolutionary, to stay in power, he had to have a well-organized population to have his back.
When you take the dictator out, there are no institutions.
That's right.
So that's
false.
But the question becomes, do you then say, let Gaddafi go ahead and kill his people because it's going to be hard afterwards? Or in our case, we thought Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
Oh, my God. They did not think Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. They lied about it. And everybody knows they lied about it. Everybody knows they lied about it. It's been documented. Whistleblowers have come out of the administration. Richard Clark and others, they didn't think they had weapons of mass destruction. They lied. They lied about it. And they tortured people to make them say that they had it. And they lied and lied, and they used bad intelligence. They cooked up a case for war. Colin Powell went to the UN with this slideshow, and it was all a big hoax. And it's been completely debunked. No, they didn't think they had weapons of mass destruction. Look at the facts. They lied. They lied. Even Donald Trump, the Republican president, says they lied. He was on the debate stage and he said to Jeb Bush, "Everybody knows your brother lied. You lied." I mean, oh, give me a break. And how is Jon Stewart just sitting there and going along with this? I mean, he knows. He was covering it. I was watching Jon Stewart in those days. He knew that they lied. He knew that they lied, and he's letting her say that?
Let that continue, or are you going to take him out? And then do the best that you can in helping people to recover. You have to recognize that it's going to be hard.
The other thing, she said that, where does the new government come from? Because, the dictators don't allow things to exist. In Iraq, they actually banned any former member of the Ba'ath Socialist Party from holding office. So anyone who'd ever had a government job, down to like the local city council, was unable to participate in running the country. And that's why Iraq descended very quickly into chaos, is that anybody that had any position in the Iraqi government was banned from, anyone with any experience was banned from running the government. And that was her policy. That was the policy of the Bush administration. They set the country up for chaos. I mean, so it wasn't, dictators allow no institutions to exist. No, you banned people from serving in the government.
You take the dictator out. But John, it's a little bit of a false choice to say, well, then just leave the dictator in place because it won't be chaotic. It may not be chaotic.
I mean, and it's like, how many dictatorships and authoritarian regimes does the United States support all over the world? I mean, you can talk about all of the authoritarian regimes that the United States is happy to play ball with. You can talk about the fact that, these countries wouldn't have had running water and electricity if it wasn't for the anti-imperialist and socialist governments that emerged. You can talk about the fact that women were participating in the government of Libya and then the government of Iraq. I mean, they were bad. They were bad. They were bad. So you're just going to leave them in power and they're bad. And it's like, everybody knows that things in Iraq are far worse than they were under the leadership of Saddam Hussein and the Ba'ath Arab Socialist Party. Things in Libya are far worse than they were under the leadership of Gaddafi. Gaddafi built Libya, for Christ's sakes.
It may not be chaotic,
if we take
but
that
it might be
role
brutal
on,
against the people.
If we take that role on, can we sustain as a country? When you think about the Soviet Union's collapse, they overextended and they got in an arms race with us and they had all these satellites. Are we overextending America's power, especially militarily, when you talk about an $800 billion?
Okay. And even that question, right? Even that question is like, okay, the Soviet Union, it's true, bankrupted itself building infrastructure in the countries aligned with it. They built the biggest power plant in Egypt and the biggest power plant in the Middle East, the Aswan Dam. That was built by the Soviet Union. I mean, they built the agricultural sector of Afghanistan up during the 1980s, during the war. They funded infrastructure projects all across the planet, even in countries that weren't aligned with them. The Soviet Union built steel mills in India. Did you know that? In India, during the 1950s and 60s, the Soviet Union financed the construction of steel mills. The Soviet Union spent a huge amount of money developing and building up the countries that it traded with, whereas the United States tears down any country that does business with them. Yeah, the United States has troops all over the world. That's true. The United States has troops all over the world, but the Soviet Union, they spent a lot of money on infrastructure, but their army was not occupying the planet. They weren't surrounding and threatening any country that dared break free from them. It's just not comparable at all. It is not comparable at all. What the United States is doing, and really, what Jon Stewart is missing here is that the Soviet Union was building themselves up and building up the Soviet-aligned countries. What the United States is doing right now is it's tearing down different countries around the world, and it's also tearing down the United States. The international bankers, the Wall Street corporations that run this country are not patriotic. They are not loyal to America. They are loyal only to their own profits. And they are currently destroying the heartland of America, destroying the Rust Belt, destroying the South, destroying the Midwest, destroying different parts of the country, letting them fall into chaos and ruin, letting the power plants fall to pieces, letting the water treatment facilities go into disrepair so the population is drinking lead in their water. They are just letting the country fall apart because they are only loyal to their own profits. They're only loyal to their open international system, their global system of monopoly capitalism, right? They are parasites, right? They're like leeches. They attach to something and they suck the life out of it. And first they were sucking the life out of Africa and sucking the life out of South America. And now they're sucking the life out of the homeland, out of America, all just to feed their own profits. So no, this is not comparable to the Soviet Union that raised itself up and made allies and came to the aid of African people and people in South America and people in Central America who are fighting for their liberation. That's not the same thing at all.
Let's assume instead of being in a podcast studio, we were in the Situation Room, or in the tank in the Defense Department, wherever we were. Right. Okay, and we're saying, okay, what do you see on the horizon? Well, North Korea is shooting these missiles over our ally, Japan.
And why is North Korea doing that? Because every year, the United States practices and has war games right on North Korea's border for the all-out destruction of North Korea. And the United States has thousands and thousands of troops in South Korea. And the United States has threatened to nuke North Korea. And every year they have these war games where they practice basically running right up to the border, and then they stop. And they do these provocative military drills threatening North Korea every year. So North Korea in response says, okay, well, we're going to demonstrate that we can shoot missiles. We can shoot missiles. Now, they don't actually hit Japan, but they say, look, you practice all out invading us. We're going to practice shooting missiles through the air, right? If you show off your, weapons and you threaten, you wave your weapons in our face, we'll wave our weapons in your face. That's what's going on there. If you stopped the military drills, if you brought the American GIs who are in South Korea home, if you brought them home, North Korea wouldn't be doing that. Most people in South Korea want peaceful reunification. Most people in North Korea has called for that from the beginning, for one government for the continent, peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula.
China is trying to build up its blue water navy so that it can compete with us anywhere in the world.
Okay. How many overseas military bases does China have? Quick question. How many overseas military bases does China have? They have one. One. It's in Djibouti. How many overseas military bases does Russia have? They have 8. How many overseas bases does the United States have? Over 800. So think about that. I'm sorry, this notion that China, with their one overseas military base, is threatening threatening the world, and are we going to let them get away with it? China's got one overseas military base. The United States has over 800. This is utterly ridiculous.
You've got, the Russia-China relationship. It's tricky, but we have to watch it really carefully because we don't know.
Why? Why would two huge countries on the Eurasian hemisphere not get along with? Why is that a bad thing? Russia and China being friends with each other. Why do you have to watch that? Right? I mean, it's like Russia is the biggest country in the world in terms of geography. China is the biggest country in the world in terms of population. They're right smack dab right next to each other. Isn't it a good thing if they're getting along with each other? I'm not seeing why that's a problem. You got to watch it. Oh, we can't have Russia and China like not fighting each other. Like what is the issue here? Russia has lots of energy, oil, and natural gas. China has a huge amount of industry, the world's biggest telecommunications manufacturer. They're making the world's most steel. China needs energy. They need oil and gas. Russia needs to sell their oil and gas. Both of these countries were dirt poor at the beginning of the 20th century, but with communist parties, they built themselves up. In the Second World War, they heroically fought the Japanese and the Germans and saved the world from fascism and started out and continued on a course of independent development. I'm looking for the part where we should be upset about that. China is building power plants all over Africa, all over Brazil. Russia has got their Eurasian Economic Union. They're helping countries in Africa to build up their mining sector with Russia's state-run mining corporations. They're helping African countries develop their mineral resources with the Eurasian Economic Union. I'm waiting for the part where this is a threat to anybody. This is people getting jobs and getting electricity and getting housing and getting running water. This is people getting education. This is people, seeing their regions electrified. There's nothing in here that is in any way a threat to anyone. Russia and China working together and trading with different countries is not a bad thing in any conceivable way, unless you're Wall Street, which means now you've got competition. They want the world dirt poor and their captive market. But for humanity, Russia and China rising up and cooperating with each other is a very good thing.
Where that might lead. We've got Iran, still a very bad actor, and probably in addition to killing.
Whoa. How is Iran a bad actor? Iran is supporting the Palestinians in their fight against Israel and Zionism. Iran is helping the people of Bahrain in their struggle for democracy against a brutal dictator imposed on Bahrain by Saudi Arabia. Iran is protecting the Shia Muslims of Iraq who've been facing terrorism at the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda groups that want to murder all Shia Muslims. Iran is aiding the people of Syria against ISIS and terror. I mean, how is Iran a bad actor? What is Iran doing that's bad? Right? Iran has had its neighbor Iraq invaded and cast into chaos, and so it's sent its military to help protect the Shia Muslims there. Right? I mean, Iran, is helping the Shia Muslim majority of the country of Bahrain fight for democracy, something the United States claims it believes in. Iran is supporting the Palestinians who've been oppressed and suffer at the hands of Israel. Israel is routinely condemned by the international community for its crimes against the Palestinians. I'm waiting for what did Iran do that was so bad? When has Iran ever invaded a country? Right? I mean, the Iraq-Iran war, they got attacked. Iraq attacked them. Has Iran ever invaded a country? Has Iran ever attacked a sovereign country and invaded and overthrew the government? What has Iran done? Name one thing that Iran has done that makes it a bad actor.
People will cause some external problems in order to take people's minds off it. We have a lot.
What external problem? What is she talking about?
A lot of issues. So do we just sit back and hope for the best, or do we try to be positioned in enough places with enough support that we can be a good ally to those who are counting on us?
And you have to watch the potential rise of terrorism again. So you have
the rise of terrorism. What happened when you overthrew Saddam Hussein? Saddam Hussein was the biggest enemy of Al-Qaeda that ever existed. He was a secular Ba'athist Arab socialist. And you removed him, and the country became a breeding ground for Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other extremist forces. And what happened when you overthrew Libya? Who set up shop in Libya? The Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda and ISIS and other terrorists. She's talking about the rise of terrorism. The U.S. wars have been the greatest beneficiaries of terrorism ever. I mean, the overthrow of the government of Afghanistan, the overthrow of the government of Libya, the overthrow of the government of Iraq, the destabilization of Syria, all of this has led to terrorist groups expanding. The USA hasn't been fighting the terrorists. It's been fighting the enemies of the terrorists. You know, Bashar Assad's government in Syria actually cooperated with the war on terror. The Libyan government of Gaddafi cooperated with the war on terror. They even tortured people. They were torturing these al-Qaeda guys for the United States. You know, this idea that overthrowing them is fighting terrorism, overthrowing them has led to a huge expansion of terrorism. Like, they don't know what they're talking about.
On your plate. But I would just say, should the United States be selective in the use of its military power?
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
After Afghanistan and Iraq, which we did for security reasons, not because we wanted to.
For security reasons? What did Iraq ever do to the United States? What did Afghanistan ever do to the United States? Neither of those countries threatened us in any conceivable way. Afghanistan offered to turn over bin Laden, and the USA wouldn't take it. They just invaded the country. Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction, was no threat to the United States. Their parliament was passing resolution after resolution saying, we don't have weapons of mass destruction. Come and look, we don't have, I mean, we're not threatening you in any way. How is it a security issue? There was no security issues. The security issues started when you invaded the country.
Democracy at gunpoint, but for security reasons.
Although ultimately we were told that spreading democracy would make the world safer because freer countries would
I think if
be
you
more peaceful.
actually look at the record, democratic countries actually don't invade their neighbors.
What is a democratic country? I mean, what makes a country democratic? And the world is not safer as a result of their operations.
Countries don't harbor terrorists. Democratic countries don't use weapons of mass destruction.
Democratic countries don't use weapons of mass destruction. What is the only country in the world that has ever used a nuclear bomb? The only country in the world to ever dropped an atomic bomb. That was the United States. So unless she's saying that the USA is not democratic, what she just told us there was a load of hogwash. I don't know how did she just say that? Democratic countries don't use weapons of mass destruction. Like, how do they get away with saying these ridiculously untrue statements?
I think
they don't harbor them, but they have them.
Well,
you can't. It'd be hard to. I mean, that
John,
was planned in
but
Germany.
They're not aided and supported by the government.
I understand what you're saying.
And the always
they're not aided. Terrorists aren't aided by the government in democratic countries. The USA sent arms to the Contras of Nicaragua. They were terrorists. The USA armed Osama bin Laden. He's a terrorist. The Chechen separatists that were kidnapping people all over Russia and doing horrendous things and taking hostages. You know, the people, the Zarnev brothers who bombed the Boston Marathon, those people, you know, I mean, how can he say this? Democratic countries don't help terrorists. I think the United States does. And unless you're saying the USA isn't democratic, holy shit.
But always try to look at the converse, right?
Yes.
Just because they have in some of these weak states terrorists among them, would you rather have somebody who's actually harboring them and assisting them?
Understood.
All the terrorist groups started setting up shop and were assisted and aided and got way more support after the USA invaded Iraq, after the USA invaded Afghanistan, after the USA invaded Libya. I mean, how do they just keep repeating these obvious falsehoods that anyone should be able to see right through?
So that's the first point. The second point is that, yes, we need to be more selective, but I would be the strongest voice, as I know Hillary is, when Vladimir Putin decides to extinguish his neighbor. Should the United States really just step back from that and say, well...
What? The United States overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014 and destabilized the country. And then Ukraine started bombing and killing the people of the eastern regions. And for 8 years, Russia facilitated and tried and begged the world to make Ukraine follow the Minsk agreement and stop bombing and killing their own people and stop the food blockade. And Ukraine didn't implement the Minsk Accords. And Russia waited and waited and waited and waited until it was very, very clear that these people were not going to be protected. Russia did everything they could possibly do not to intervene. Russia decides to extinguish its neighbor. Yeah, the Russian President Putin was having a bad day, and he woke up and he's like, you know what? Why don't we invade Ukraine? I mean, that's not what happened. right? I mean, this has been 8 years of instability in Ukraine, 8 years of the people of the eastern regions being bombed and attacked and killed, 8 years of Ukraine having more weapons piled into it, of Ukraine threatening to join NATO, talking about getting nuclear weapons. Oh my God.
Kind of your business after all. Ukraine's been a part of the Russian Empire and so forth.
Yeah, if the USA had never gotten involved, none of this would have ever happened. The whole reason that Russia is having to militarily intervene in Ukraine is because of the fact that the United States has been meddling in Ukraine and destabilizing Ukraine and funding extremists in Ukraine for 8 years. And so she's saying, oh, we should we just sit back and let it happen? It's happening because you're already there.
There are some people in the United States who would say, not in Ukraine, let's do it in Des Moines. And I think that's the bigger threat.
Wait, not in Ukraine, let's do it in, what is she talking about? Not in Ukraine, let's do it in Des Moines. And what is she talking about?
That the United States will not feel that the American people will not feel the pull to continue to be the place that people can look when something awful like that happens.
But is it then?
What in the world is she talking about? There's this danger that countries around the world won't expect the United States to militarily intervene. And that's the big danger. Like, what in the world is she talking about?
Between the first Gulf War, which is Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait and the United States forms a coalition and helps push him out.
Yeah. Saddam Hussein was given permission by the United States to invade Kuwait. Google it. The United States actually told Iraq to go ahead and invade Kuwait. The U.S. government went to Saddam Hussein and said, if you want to invade Kuwait, go right ahead. They gave him permission to do it. That is a fact. And then as soon as the USA got into Kuwait, the Iraqi army retreated immediately. And then the Americans started slaughtering the Iraqi army while they were retreating. It was one of the most cowardly acts, in modern history. The Iraqi army was retreating from Kuwait. They invaded Kuwait with the understanding that the United States had given them permission. And then the United States sent its forces in, and then they were like, oh shit. And so it's called the Highway of Death. Look it up. The whole Iraqi army, as soon as the United States got involved in Kuwait, the whole Iraqi army pulled out and they piled onto this highway to get the hell out of there. They didn't want to have a war with America. And they were retreating, and an army full of teenagers, teenage boys, and they were on this highway trying to get out of Kuwait, retreating. And the Americans bombed them and killed thousands and thousands of Iraqis who were retreating, shooting them in the back. One of the most cowardly acts in history. Learn history, Jon Stewart. That was not the Kuwait intervention. The USA intervening in Kuwait and attacking Iraq, the Gulf War, was not a heroic thing at all. You told Saddam Hussein, you told Iraq they could invade Kuwait. They did, and then you murdered them as they retreated. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Versus the United States deciding these bad actors, we really are the only country. It's not that other people don't meddle, but we're the only country that actively promotes regime change.
Wow. I mean, how could anyone watch such a conversation? I mean, anyone who knows anything about world history would have to see that interview and just be shocked. I mean, the amount of lying, the amount of bold assumptions, they just appeal to people's biases. They just appeal to the standard narrative, right? And I mean, that was shocking to me. That was utterly shocking to me. Jon Stewart is the ultimate shit lib. Yeah, I mean, I thought he was better than this. I really thought he was better than this. I mean, that was really something bad I just watched there. I am quite shocked at how bad that was, what we just saw.